Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Made for Love, and I'm here with my lovely friend Jody,
Hi, everyone.
and we are going to be talking about um, a topic that people kind of shy away from, and that is the topic of death. So I'm just going to wait for a few moments while people come on the chat. So, guys, if you're coming on, could you just let us know where you're coming on from? Like where shout out your city. Shout out your city. Yeah. We'll just wait a few minutes while people come on. How are you? It's so nice to see you. Where are you joining us from? Could you put where you're joining us from in the chat? Max, thank you so much for being here. Max is my par excellence mediator. She's always here.
Thank you,
Jody.
Max.
And
Thank
then
you
we
for
have
helping.
JB always here. Claudia is from Trinidad and Tobago. So these are the usual suspects.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent.
JB's from Texas. Beautiful. Welcome, guys. We're just waiting a few minutes while people come in on the chat. And Jody and I, we were just catching up on personal things um, whilst we were in the studio there, and then we kind of got into the topic and we started running on, and we almost like missed the start time. Um, and what we were talking about is we were talking about now. Jody might tell you, but she has um her love, Ginger,
Mm.
um, who is currently about to transition. It is her dog, her soulmate, and we were talking about, the last moments, like, the last leg of it, surrendering to joy, and how surrendering to that joy does what we think make the transition process go much more smoothly, much more peaceful. And it's when we're in
Mm.
resistance, then we may see the manifestations of a more difficult passing. How much do you agree with that, Joni?
Like so much, so much, and the thing is too is like with Ginger right now, we are living in a little bit of uncertainty because we don't know, she could have years yet, she could not. And
Yeah,
so, but isn't that always the case? And so it really
right.
brings things into such sharp focus, like, and it's for her in particular, it was an easy choice. We had the option to do chemotherapy because
Yeah,
she had a cancerous tumor removed from her thyroid, which is
yeah,
like not great for dogs.
right.
So, we thought about, the doctor gave us all the options, and one of them was like a couple different kinds of chemotherapy. Well, that requires a whole lot of veterinary visits. This dog has been through so
Yeah,
much. And so it was a really easy choice. She's super traumatized by the doctor. It was a super easy choice to say, let's make the rest of her days full of joy. Like,
yeah,
it's easy, kind of. It's not easy. It's not at all easy with a dog, but it's different with animals because they don't have the same kind of connection to longevity. They're just like,
right.
let's live for the moment. And, however many moments we get, that's great. Not that they don't
Yeah.
try and stick around either. They do that, but, it's just totally different for animals.
So it's easier for them to surrender.
It is because they're already living in, like just such presence, and they're so good for us in that way. So, it was
Right.
a really easy choice, heart wrenching, but easy choice to say, let's live in every joyful moment. Let's create as much joy. Let's create as much presence. And, I think that we can do that no matter what, no matter who we're embarking on the transition process with, because especially when we know in advance, it really is a
Yeah.
gift to get every moment you can with a person. or an animal, or whoever it is you're sort of doing that massive change transition work with. So did that make
Yeah.
sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And I know it really, brings us to the question of like the role of persons who choose death work as a
Mm,
profession. And then there's
yeah,
also, like all of us at some point, we are going to be that death worker where we are going to be holding space for someone at
yeah,
some point who is
yeah.
going to
It's
pass.
hmm
Like, what are we doing in that moment, Jody? What are we doing?
I suppose holding space, right? And
Yeah,
like our ability to hold space expands exponentially in those moments if we allow it. But a big part of it, I think, has to be to balance the emotional impact of what we're experiencing humanly
yeah,
with like the with an awareness that that's not all that's happening.
right, right.
It's
Yeah,
so
yeah,
hard because you're
yeah.
grieving, but I talk a lot about grief as an energy instead
Yeah.
of an emotion, because that energy then moves so much and like dredges up all of the like things we need dredged up.
Mhm.
Death and transition is such a huge moving energy, not just for the person who's having the experience of dying, but for everyone around, because we're all transmuting all the connections we've shared with those beings. And that is just like a massive alchemical work, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So, is that what's beautiful about death? Because you've written a book
Yeah,
that's called Beautiful Death, right?
yeah, yes.
Is that what is beautiful about death? Tell me what is beautiful about death.
I think that there are a number of things that are beautiful about death. One is the massive healing potential for the being who's experiencing their death, especially because it's the chance for a being to throw off so much of what they've experienced in each body. And then, my goodness, like the amount of karma that can be transmuted in those last, however many days, weeks, months, or years someone is going through the process. There's
Yeah,
so much transmutative potential in
right.
death for the person who's experiencing it, and the energetics of it are so like massive and beautiful. And as a being like traverses the journey, the energies change in this most remarkable way and become this, I mean, just such beautiful swirls of light I've never experienced in any other circumstance in my whole life before.
Yeah,
And so for the person that's holding space, like, oh, it's so gut wrenching and heart wrenching to say goodbye, but we're the ones who are experiencing like a loss. They
yeah,
aren't. They're moving into what's next. They're moving back into oneness. They're reuniting completely with their souls, which is
yes,
another part of it that's just so beautiful. For us who are left behind, we're the ones who suffer death, and so we're the ones who have like an opportunity to take all everything that comes up and transmute it as well, and then move forward in our lives completely changed by the experience. I don't know anyone who has experienced death with someone, particularly someone they love, but I don't think it even
yes.
has to be someone you're close to, without having it be like life changing and without
Changing.
having it change your entire perspective on everything, right? So I
Yeah.
feel like that is so beautiful. I mean, I'm a little obsessed with healing, being someone who, is on a spiritual journey and feels like
Hmm.
that's a big part of what we're doing here as human beings.
Yeah.
So I feel like the most beautiful part of death is what massive potential there is for healing, not just for the being who is going through it, but for everyone around them, everyone they're connected to. Sometimes even the people who hear about it, right? We hear about
Right.
deaths all the
Yes.
time, and it
Yes.
shifts something in us, whether it's someone we're connected to or just someone out in the world who we hear their
Yes.
story, and it hits us, or it just like shifts something in our energy field, does it? A new understanding or something. So yeah, so I guess I really, it was such a wild thing to hear someone talk about death the first time as a beautiful thing, I was just like, that is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. But then I learned how beautiful it could be. So, and we do all get the chance. That it is pretty universal, isn't it?
It is. It is a
Yeah.
universal experience.
Yeah.
It is a universal experience. When you were talking just a moment ago, you talked about the process of dying.
Mm,
And when people think about dying, like they think about a moment in time,
mm,
like
yeah.
like it's restricted to a particular time period.
Mm-hmm.
But for everybody, it's going to be like different. The imminent death. We think about it even maybe might be 1 hour or 1 week
Yeah.
or 1 month, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's not restricted to that particular moment when that
Yeah.
person passes in the 3D.
Mm-hmm.
And even when they pass, that process, from my understanding, from what you wrote,
Mm.
still continues. It's not just they pass and then their soul goes.
Right.
Tell me,
Yeah.
what's your understanding of what happens?
I think it's case by case, absolutely, because I think each and every death is so unique and individual to the being who's
Mm,
experiencing it. So,
mhm.
but I do think that the way that a soul experiences that, I do think there are certain things that are sort of common, I suppose.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, oh, how do I describe that? As a building of a bridge, that's absolutely the way
Okay.
that I think it works, is like a being, no matter how long or short that time takes while they're still
Yeah.
alive,
Yes.
they're building a bridge, they're creating a framework to
I
cross
love that.
over. I do too,
Love
and
that.
then as they continue, yeah, there's all sorts of there can be. I suppose some beings just leave. They're just like, all right, I'm done. I did all the work. Here I go. And you're like, okay, they're gone. But a lot of beings, I think, stick around to sort of continue the transmutation of those connections with the people
Right.
and other beings that they love. I think we definitely feel people and animals that have been with us in life that
Yes.
are still with us after they're gone. Oh, and here's another part of it that I think is really like important to recognize, is that there's a certain timelessness in oneness, right? It's not linear. So you know
Right. Okay.
yeah, we're
Hmm.
all existing all together all the time with all of the love that we've experienced. And so,
Right.
especially when someone who is a soulmate passes, you go like, this person is never going to be gone from my heart, but they're also never going to be gone from my energy field, because we are part
No.
of like a collective oneness. And that is
Right.
a thing that I love about it. It's
Mhm.
an opportunity to experience the relationship in a totally different way, because we have totally different contexts and understandings and just experiences with people who are not embodied anymore. It just is, we know them different. I don't know. I think that's a really remarkable thing I didn't understand before I started, like being put in the position to hold space for death over and over and over again.
Let me ask you something. Okay, so
Yeah.
within that context that we are always existing with these people
Hmm.
in a timelessness, right?
Yeah.
What about persons that we would call earthbound or ghosts?
Mm.
Person
Hmm.
that can't seem to make the
Yeah.
transition. Like what what I wouldn't say what's keeping them here per se, with given what you just said, but
Hmm.
what makes them unable to build that bridge, I guess.
Again, I think that's individual, case by case. And I think
Right.
that a lot of it, what I just heard as you asked that question, is that is just one aspect of a being.
Right.
So,
Right.
like a whole other, well, I guess like that iceberg metaphor, right? Where just like just only the very tip of an iceberg is showing, and there's this whole other mountain underneath it. It's like a complete essence of a being is so much more than just the one part of us that's existing physically in these bodies. So that's what I got when you asked that question, is like an earthbound spirit is still just one aspect of a being who has
Right.
chosen to experience a different way of existing for whatever
Right.
period of time. And
Mm-hmm.
again,
Mm-hmm.
we can help
Yep.
them build their bridges. We can help them
Right.
process and transmute whatever they were not able to process and transmute in physical bodies.
Right.
But it's kind of similar. It's just another way of experiencing life and
Like,
essence. Yeah.
hmm, I like that answer. That makes sense to me. Makes
Yeah,
sense
me
to me.
too. I like that. I hadn't ever, gotten that before. So that's a neat. Thank you for asking
Makes
that
sense.
question. It
Because
opens
I
me
was
up.
listening to a seminar on Earthbound,
Yeah.
and the last point they were talking about, what would, like, why would someone not be able to like build that
Mm,
bridge or transition or whatever? We're
yeah.
talking about different things. We're talking about beliefs. We're talking about unresolved issues, not being able to let go of certain things, their
Yeah.
emotions, that kind of thing, not being able to transmute those things. And then
Yeah.
the last point that was made was from a lady from Somalia, and she
Mm,
was saying, "Well, I'm just going to throw that in there, but maybe this is what they've chosen to do. Like this,
yeah.
they're part of their contract to exist
Yeah.
in this kind of so-called limbo for this moment in time."
Mm,
And all the other commentators were like, "Oh," but to me, it made sense because we always have
me
choice,
too.
don't we?
On a soul level, right? I don't think as human beings we choose like, our greatest suffering, but on a soul
Yes.
level, we're always
Yeah.
choosing
Yeah.
how to experience, how to,
Exactly.
and I think that's absolutely it. I think, they are, and perhaps like you said, like there are soul contracts. So perhaps those beings have also contracted with, the people who will encounter them. And I think a lot of people's perceptions and experiences and their awareness gets stretched by the idea of earthbounds or by the idea
Yeah.
of spirits, and that's a gateway for a lot of people into wondering and experiencing
Yes.
the
Yes.
metaphysical in general. So I think that's an
Yes.
interesting way too, that they help people sometimes to
Yes.
expand. Yeah.
Because for a lot of us, our first experience with spirit or what we would call the paranormal or whatever,
Yeah.
most likely would have been an earthbound, some kind of thing that went bump in the night.
Yeah, or something, like I don't have a ton of experience with them myself, like in my conscious awareness,
Yeah.
but like, just even as a kid hearing about it and like getting that like
Yeah.
feeling of truth, like just knowing, I mean, I just always knew that was true, that
Yes.
was a potential, that they were out there and that they were experiencing whatever they were experiencing. And it is like gave me a little like sparkly kind of awareness, I suppose. Yeah.
I guess. And maybe they also, it's helpful to people for people to know that like there is, people wonder about life after death and what happens after death. So I
Yeah.
guess it's kind of comforting to some people as well.
I
And
think
look, Claudia
so.
was
Yeah.
no, go ahead, go ahead. So go
Oh,
ahead.
I just said, yeah, I think so. I think that I think that there are a lot of people who don't believe in anything.
Yeah.
And I have like so much respect because I feel like people who are experiencing life that way have often really thought it out. It's like often
Yes.
really
Yes.
they've gone through all of the angles and the whole spectrum and they've come to this belief, right? But for me, I just like couldn't. I tried it on for a minute. I just couldn't. It was like there was just too many things that made me feel connected to something else, and then that is a comfort. I did find that comforting at different times, knowing like that I don't believe that anything ends. So
Yes.
yeah.
And then we had two comments in the chat that was
Okay.
like, that's just bolstering that point actually. Because
Yeah.
Claudia was saying that sometimes they stay back, to
Yeah.
watch over the family or someone who they were
Yeah.
always close to. And then
Mm.
Mex always also added that her grandmother still talks to her and is one of her spirit guides.
That's
So
beautiful.
there's that work that's happening there. So that's two examples of them existing in the timelessness
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you were just talking about.
Yeah, and that reminded me of this energy I got. Someone had asked me, it was several years ago. They had a friend that had passed over, and she was um, not old, and she had left a couple of very young children behind. And it
Yeah.
was obviously really sad humanly, to hear this story. But what I got when I tuned in about it was that this mother on a soul level had chosen to be there for her children in a different way. And she was
Yeah.
never going to leave them. She was going to be with them through their whole lives. And this was the way she was going to be able to, protect them and guide them and be there for them, because humanly and in a body, she had limitations she wouldn't have in
Yeah.
spirit. And I thought, wow, that really expanded my awareness, because like, oh my goodness, there are so many, like, well, and there are so many sad stories, and humanly sadness is like is real. It is real. We can talk about the spiritual all day, but there is a human aspect that just gets really, really sad sometimes, right?
Yes.
But when we can, kind of oscillate between the human and the higher perspective,
Yeah.
it really helps to move that energy. The sadness, the emotion, that's part of what grounds us. That's part of what makes us human beings, right? But being able to move between the human and the higher perspective can really shift a lot of energy for us and for everyone around us too. It's actually like 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 an exercise, it
Yes.
yeah.
The spiritual, flexing the spiritual muscles, right?
It is. Yeah, yeah. Yep. And it is like a discipline too, because it's so easy to either want to exist in the higher perspective all the time and just be like, you know, in bliss and in oneness, but
Yes.
it's also really, really easy to get caught up in the emotion too, and just feel all your feelings and feel how compelling they are.
Yeah.
So it's a discipline to keep that oscillation, excuse me.
Yeah. And as you're drinking there, because that's what I noticed in your book too. Like, as you said, sometimes we can get caught up in the high aspects of it and the spiritual aspects of it and forget the humanness and the 3D
Yeah.
things that are going on. But in your book, it's really the grittiness and the reality
Mm.
of the 3D aspects of death, which can be
Yeah.
very painful,
Yeah.
very raw, um, too real. Let's say too
Too
real,
real. Oh,
too
too
real.
real. Yeah.
And then there's also the higher perspective of what's happening
Yeah.
whilst this process is playing out in the 3D. I
Yeah.
really like that.
Thank you. It was the hardest part, honestly. Especially like with the animals, because um we have such a oh, it's such a beautiful thing to have euthanasia for our animals, to provide them with like a comfortable passing and everything. And I worried so much in telling their stories, because I was so sure, well, no, I talk about that too, don't I? As like, there was the human like struggle of like,
Yes.
is this the right thing to do? They want this from me. They want to be held by me. And I was prepared. I had like early on, when they started getting old, I had Googled at home euthanasia. I had the number saved on my phone. Like, I knew that if it ever crossed into a point where they needed that help, I was there for
Yeah.
them. But I
Yeah.
also knew that that's not what any of the three of them in particular, who I was aware of the process
Yes.
for, wanted
Mhm.
from me. But like, whew, that watching a being, and we don't always do that for humans. I think it's getting a little more possible for some, in some aspects, for people to find um, that as an option. But
Yeah.
we have more of an acceptance of like, people have to go through this like really death, like the whole physical process of it. But it's so sticky humanly to watch every single, I don't know, symptom
Yes.
change, like
Yes.
every the way the body breaks down, the way it stops. I talk about this a lot in the book, the way that a being stops being able to eat eventually,
Yes.
and like what that means, and like what should you do, and like, oh, it's all so humanly like gritty. Yeah, it is really
Yes.
gritty, isn't it?
Mhm. It
And
is
gross.
gritty.
Sometimes it's quite
And
gross too.
gross.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it, but you're right. And gross, but on the other side, what's happening spiritually is like a stark contrast. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. And I suppose, like, birth is kind of gross too in a lot of ways. Like, I've never done it
Yes,
myself, so I've never actually been in the room for it either, so I can only speak to like what I've heard and seen like from
it
like
is gross,
family pictures and stuff.
but spiritually, it is beautiful.
Yeah, and both are. And I remember Little Dog at one point as she was dying, like pointing that out to me. It's just like, this is no different than birth. It's a different kind of beginning. And it has to be like gritty and it kind of has to be gross because this is where we're living. We're living in a place of matter, and that matter has to break down. It has to stop working. And that is a part of the transmutation of energy, is for the dense of the physical to break down, and
Yes,
the higher aspect of a being, of a soul, to move out of that physical. But
yeah,
humanly, man. And that was, I was pushed and compelled to include the gritty details, but
yeah.
that was the part that humanly I was most uncomfortable sharing, because it's like, it's easy to talk about the beautiful parts, isn't it?
Yes, it is, but the reality of it, it's gross.
It's so gross. It's so
It is.
gross.
It is. Now I'm looking at the chat, and
Yeah.
Diana,
Yeah.
she lost her mom
Mm.
11 days ago. So this is fresh, this is raw.
Mm.
And she is saying that her spiritual awareness has helped her process the death. Do you find
Yeah.
that persons who are more spiritually aware may have an easier time accepting, or it's again in more individual and what the
I think,
circumstances around it?
yeah, I think so. And I think it probably has a lot to do with whatever connections are remaining, whatever work has not been done between two
Yeah,
beings in the lifetime. I think karmas probably have a lot to do with that. But I think that for those of us who, have chosen like a healing life and a spiritual work, yeah, I do think that we do a lot of the work before someone leaves. And even if, I think it said that her mom passed suddenly, right? Deanna,
yes,
my
yes,
heart's with
certainly.
you. Um, and
That's
yeah, I'm just asking angels to surround you right now too, because it's a lot. It's a lot to have to
yeah,
do that kind of transmutative work afterward, but you're aware of the work, so yeah, I think it does make a difference, because if a person is not aware of the work that needs to be done in terms of transmuting connections, and is not aware of what's happening on the other side for the other being, it's just painful. I mean, it's
it
just
is.
pure suffering, and then it's like you're being dragged by your soul through the work, sort of across like hot coals and shards of glass, where
Mm-hmm.
if you have the spiritual work, yeah, you're still going to get burned and cut sometimes by the just like the raw experience of
Yeah,
the human part, losing, like having an absence of someone. But it's not, it's just, it does help. I think it just absolutely does help. Yeah.
I think so too. I think so too. Now, when we had just started the chat, Max was saying that there are a lot of people that come to her or visit her in spirit before
Mm.
they pass. And I also remember listening to an interview. Now, we have this person in Trinidad and Tobago. Her name is Twiggy, and
Hmm.
she calls herself Twiggy. That's not a nickname that I made up or anything. She's
Yeah.
really like what we call talawa in Caribbean language, because this is someone
Mm.
who is thin and small, but they have a big
Mm.
personality.
Mm.
Right,
Yeah.
she's that kind
Yeah.
of person.
Yeah.
And she was saying that she found it odd that when she visits people who are in the process of dying, they always die in her presence.
Mm.
So to me, and then Max was saying that
Yeah.
what makes some persons better at holding space, for those persons who are making that transition at that particular moment in time.
Yeah.
What and let's say we're not better. But let's say we are faced with this prospect of having to hold that space while someone dies. What should we really focus on doing in that moment?
Mm. I think that it's more often than not something that just happens. I think that some
Right.
of us have energetic fields that are structured for this kind of work, that
Got
can
you.
help create the bridge, that can help someone pass over it. One of the things that I didn't understand but saw over and over was that my field
Yes.
actually can help alleviate suffering. And actually, there was a bird last year who died in our yard, and I watched, like, it was in pretty bad shape, but as I just sat with it, it just breathed easier. It just
Yes.
slipped away. It was like not suffering at all. And after I moved it, I realized that it had been in really bad shape. So I didn't move it while it was still alive. I waited till after it was done. But
Yeah.
so, it's like I didn't make any choice. I just sat there, and each
Right.
and every time I just held space. And I think that cultivating our ability to hold space is one of the things we can do if we know this
Mm,
is a work that we're called to. And then
yes.
also visualization and prayer, or whatever prayer means to you, whatever calling on beings of light who can help. Um, yeah, kind of cultivating those relationships. For me, it's like a lot of archangels, a lot of nature spirits and
Right.
devas, beings of light. My loved ones who have passed over, they help me hold space. Um,
Yes.
and so I think there's a lot of things we can do, but in the moment, I think it's really just about being as grounded and centered as we can, and just holding that space and allowing a flow of healing light through us into the
Right.
space that we're sharing. I mean, we merge energy fields all the time with
Yes.
beings, right? And
Yes.
so when we sit with someone, whether it be in person or from afar, we merge our energy fields together. And so any amount of light we can bring through our energy field is just amplifying whatever they're doing and helping them in whatever ways we can. But I think that there there are a bunch of reasons. This is what I wanted to say also, is there's a bunch of reasons why our fields are structured this way. And I think for a lot of us, it's from past lives. You know, I asked someone who was tuned in for me one time, like what this was, and they got that I had had at least one lifetime, probably more, as like a battlefield nurse or physician,
Right.
and it was all death, all carnage. It was not like, it's like old times where, like, it was just, you just sit with someone while they bleed out, and it's brutal and gory and everything like that. But it created an infrastructure in my field, over and over and over again, to be able to do that work, and yeah. So I don't think we necessarily even consciously know what makes it happen. um,
Yeah.
I think we know when we don't shy away from it, that it's something that we're called to do, right?
And as you said, call to do, this is like literally the question that Mex just put in the chat. How
I
do
love
we
when that
know?
happens.
and, and it always happens when we're on, right?
Yes.
How do we know if we are
Yes.
called to do this type of work? And how
Yes.
did you know that
Well,
you were called to do this type of work?
I mean, I just had a whole bunch of people and animals die all right in a row. And so I
Yeah.
didn't know. And in fact, I talk about this in the book too, is like, I so it went like this. I had 7 beings within 4 years. The first was my dad, and then 3
Yeah.
weeks later my German shepherd died. And
Yeah.
then we went into taking care of my great uncle and great aunt, who were the grandparents of my heart. And
Yes.
my chihuahua and my 2 cats were like ancient. And so
Yes.
they all went. Then I had a 2-year break, and then my Uncle Don died, Aunt Ro died, my 2 cats died, and my chihuahua, all within 19 months of each other. So
My God.
within 4 years, I held space for 7 deaths. At the beginning of that, like after Dad and Marcy, my German Shepherd, died, I was just terrified for those other 5. I was just all the
Yes.
time in a state of constant stress and anxiety, feeling like, oh my God, how can I keep them alive? What if I
Yes.
don't? What if I don't keep them alive? Like, and of course I can't keep them alive. I mean, the people were in their 90s. The animals were all like 16, 17, and 18 and a half. Like they were, it was old
They
age,
live
you
full
know?
lives. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a little bit forced into it, and it was a progression of recognizing that this was, that I was doing something, especially um, with the animals, because by that point I had already been through like 4 deaths. But um, yeah, I think that there are certain people who can't be near it, right? I heard this story about like this really like massive guru, right? Just like one of those beings who came to earth, who was here for like just to do a massive work of light. And he would go to his like the people in his ashram, he'd go like for family dinners, and when someone in the family was about to die, he'd stop showing up. So here's this
Right.
massive light warrior here to hold this massive space on this planet, and he can't do the
Deal
death
with
thing,
death.
you
Right.
know and so it's like there are beings who, and it's not, it's there's no hierarchy, right? It's no judgment. It's like it's just either something your field is calibrated for or something it's not. And some people can't be there for it. It's just not, they can't do it, and other people can, and in fact feel like compelled to. And I
Yeah.
think that is a big part of how is like what happens when you're in the presence of death, when it's coming, when you're interacting with a being who is dying. And how do you feel about like knowing that a being is dying? What does that open up in you, if anything? Maybe it doesn't,
Yeah.
maybe it closes something off because that's not part of your job, maybe. But if it is part of your job, I think it opens a part of your heart that you weren't even necessarily aware of before. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense, Jodie.
Yeah.
Jodie, before my dad died,
Yeah.
I I'm pretty good with disconnect. I was pretty good with disconnecting from my emotions. Like
Mhm.
I'll just float away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'll just float away. And that's why tarot was always kind of important to me because it
yeah.
helped me reconnect with myself and
Mhm.
what I was feeling in any given moment.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty good, or was pretty good, with just, okay, this emotional thing is happening.
Yep.
Life moves on. So I'm just going to put that there
Yeah,
and I'll keep that there in its little corner. And after a while, I'm not going to feel anything about it.
yeah.
You can't do that with grief.
No, no, you
No,
can't.
not for a long time. You might go
No.
through denial and so on, but at some point, that is going to catch up with you.
It will, right? It just moves up and
It just
in.
moves
Yep.
and blows you open.
Yeah.
And then everything else, you're feeling everything else, not just
Yeah.
my dad's death, but betrayals from the past. And it's like
Oh,
everything just floods in.
yeah. Yeah,
I
definitely.
resonate with that. I
Yeah,
resonate.
because it is. It just moves everything. It restructures your entire energy field to experience that kind of grief, like to go through that kind of loss. It does. It restructures your energy field. So like
Yeah.
your emotional body changed completely in the course of that process. And then all this stuff that had been locked away in tidy little boxes where it belonged as far as you were concerned, right? Just
Yes.
the boxes blow wide open, and there you are with like years of emotions flooding everything, right?
Yes.
But isn't that
Exactly.
the gift that our loved ones give us as they're leaving?
It.
Is like, okay,
Yes.
here you go. Here's a complete restructuring of how you're going to exist for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And it is beautiful. I mean, hard, just so hard. But
But beautiful.
like look at all the things that you've healed since then, right? And like all the
Yes.
things I've healed since then. It's like all the things that were never meant to maybe be yeah, put away in boxes. I mean, not meant to be, like we all go through we have our um coping mechanisms and our
Yes.
abilities at any given time. Sometimes we have to put things in boxes. Sometimes it's not,
Yes.
we're not ready for it. But
Yes.
and I think that's the thing to mark here too, is like what comes up while you're grieving is what's ready to
Mm,
heal. It's not anything that shouldn't come up. Like the stuff that still
correct.
needs to stay buried will stay buried
Yes,
until it's ready. But that flood of energy that moves through your entire field when you're grieving will bring up any and everything that needs and is ready to be transmuted.
agreeing with you. And that's why, we always say, like, deaths and funerals will bring out the best and the worst in people.
Uh-huh.
You
Yeah.
will see it all. You
Oh,
cannot hide. You cannot hide. Like
no.
recently, one of my friends lost their dad.
Mm,
And she had a brother that was always kind of closed off.
yeah.
And with the death of their dad, it was like the floodgates opened.
Mhm.
All kind of different things just started coming up for him, and he
Yeah.
wasn't able to be reticent anymore. Everything just came pouring out.
Yeah. It's it's big. It's so big.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm. So, to go back to Max's question,
Yeah.
we will know if we're called to this work when we find ourselves in repeated positions to hold space for
Yeah.
others. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we don't have to go looking for it. It comes to us. And we're going to
Yes.
notice that pattern.
And I think some people are like, hospice workers, I think are definitely like go looking for it, right? It's
They go
there's
look
something
right.
in them
Okay, yeah,
that's like
you're right. You're right. You're right. You're
yep.
right.
And so I think that there are people who are called into it, like but
Yes.
I wonder how many of them were called into it through experiencing death with someone to begin with.
Ah,
I would suspect it would be a high percentage, but I
I
wouldn't know.
suspect so. I
Yeah.
suspect so.
Yeah.
There must have, I think, I really do think so. I think there's a lady, she makes it her work. She believes that her life work is to open conversations about death. I can't remember her
Mhm.
name. So she helps people prepare for death, and
Yeah.
not just spiritually, but also the nitty gritty of
Oh,
planning their own funeral and their last wishes and that kind of stuff.
yeah.
And she say, no, the way that we handle death, especially in the West,
Mhm.
very different to how we would have handled death way back when. It
Yeah.
wasn't this taboo thing. It wasn't a thing that people feared, but it was a thing that
Yeah.
people prepared for. When we think about the pharaohs and so on, they're building their sarcophagi like years in advance, right?
Yes.
Waiting for this,
Yes.
storing their grain and stuff. And then suddenly it
Yes.
became very taboo. I wonder
Mm.
when that shift happened, though. That's just so strange,
Yeah, yeah. I feel like maybe industrial revolution time, it's like everyone's
right?
perspective on what mattered kind of changed.
Yes,
And it feels like maybe that was a time, and I think too like the way that our elderly people are sort of put away, like we don't want to
but
look at them, we don't want to be
right,
reminded of mortality, like, but
right.
before they were honored and revered and taken care of, and
Yes,
people lived like multi generational houses and
that's right.
home and lives, and it was just so different, wasn't it? And I think that
Yeah,
that's an imbalance that needs to be corrected, so that a lot of this suffering that happens around death is maybe isn't necessary. There's plenty of
right.
suffering around it that's going to happen no matter what, but a lot of it I feel like is from just really messed up perspectives we have about it and misunderstandings we have about it. So I hope that we can, like in talking about it and having these conversations, that we can, open some hearts, and people can start to see it differently. I mean, I think we are, I think we're in like good company here anyway. I think most of the people, from what I get from the energy of the group, is
Yes,
is pretty
yeah.
open to this already and has experienced some of it themselves already. So I think, but the more we can share what we've experienced and our perspective on it with people, I think the more it opens up something for healing within them too. Because everyone,
Mm,
like you said, it's like everyone's, the likelihood is everyone is going to experience the loss of a loved one, um,
yeah.
at some point in their lives.
Mhm, yeah. And Max is also bringing up this issue of culture here again.
Mm,
And she's saying some cultures, funerals don't happen for at least a month because
yeah.
it's believed that the spirit and the soul doesn't
Yeah.
exit the body in totality all the
Yeah.
way just yet, and that
Yeah.
the brain is the last part to die, right?
Mm. That makes
And
sense, doesn't it?
it does, right?
Mm-hmm.
It does. And I feel like maybe in the West we don't, or we've forgotten our death rituals,
Yes.
and all the preparation that goes into death, whether it's,
Yeah.
weeks before, years before. Listen, when I was growing up, my mother had picked her funeral dress by the time she was in her 30s.
Uh-huh.
We knew it hung in the wardrobe, and she's
Yeah.
like, if anything happened, you're gonna bury me in that dress,
This
and
is the
please
one.
don't let the mortician put on my makeup. You're gonna put on this red lipstick, blah 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 blah, right?
Yeah.
But now people don't even talk about their wishes, what they
Yeah.
want to have happen,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. It just feels all like taboo, like
Mm-hmm.
confronting the idea of yourself dying is like, is it you swear it's gonna happen right now, but the thing is we just don't know. Why
Yeah.
can't we have these conversations now?
Yeah. It's important. And, especially like for the people who have to deal with the details, it's
Yes.
really nice to know what a person wants
Yes.
and not have to guess. Yeah. And just the whole entire awareness and conversation around it. Yes, it's fraught and it feels morbid and stuff, but you know, it's so much better to have these conversations. Well, here's just like an example of this too is like we were talking to our regular vet, not the specialist who did the surgery for
Hmm.
Ginger, and talking about like, oh, we're hoping she'll be okay for a really long time. But I said, you know what? Is there like an at-home euthanasia thing that happens around here? Because I want to ask this question while I'm totally emotionally stable and while I
Yes.
don't need the
Yes.
information. And so we
Yes.
got a card and it's tucked away in a drawer. We know where it is. We're prepared. We're hoping that we don't have to be prepared for a really long time, but we're prepared. And like mom and I have had a lot of conversations around it of like, okay, what do we want? How do we want this to
Yeah.
go? But it feels so tricky. But the more that you do it, the easier it gets, I think, and the more
Yes.
understanding you have of like why it's important. Um, it's so much easier too if everyone is on the same page and everyone
Right.
knows, because then like
Right.
there's so much conflict that can happen in families around death. And
Oh, my mom is setting me up for that right now, and I told her so.
mm,
My
yeah.
mom came up with an odd request
Mm.
last year. Oh my God, Jody. My mom says that she wants to be buried with her mother. Now,
Yeah. Yeah.
my mom was the one that stayed back. That's what I call her, the one that stayed
Yeah.
back,
Yeah.
right? So they all went off on university or whatever it is. My
Yeah.
mom stayed to be the emotional babysitter. Even when my
Hmm.
grandfather died, when my mom was 14, my mom
Hmm.
had to be the one that was caretaking,
Yeah.
because my grandmother was basically grieving herself to death for more than 2 years. She ended
Yeah.
up hospitalized. Nothing
Wow.
wrong with her except grief.
Yeah.
And so she was the one that stayed back.
Yeah.
And now she's telling me she doesn't
Hmm.
want to be buried next to daddy. She wants to be buried with her mother. I
Yeah.
said, if that is your last wish, that is not a problem with me. But
Yeah.
you have to start these conversations with your brothers and sisters.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you come in after she's gone and say this
Hello,
is what you wanted, that's
hello.
that's totally different. Yeah.
And she's also told just me. She's told me, she's not told my other brothers and sisters. She's
Yeah.
just told me. I said, you have to have a conversation. Start having conversations with your brothers and sisters, because I don't want to go digging up
No.
Granny's grave. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like it's a
I
big deal.
It's a
There's a
big
whole lot.
deal. It's a big deal. It's a big
Yeah.
deal. And she doesn't seem to see it as a big deal. I said, Mommy, that's going to be big problem for me. You need to
Yeah.
start talking. You need to start dropping little hints
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yes.
Every,
Or at least write
everywhere,
a
okay?
note, like write a
That's what
note
I'm
to be
saying.
unearthed
That's
later.
And
Something.
this is
Something.
this is so new though. This is so
Yeah.
new. because she always told me, okay, what will happen if she goes into a vegetative state?
Mhm.
As I told you, what she wants to be buried in, where she
Yeah.
wants to be buried, what kind
Yeah.
of song she wants. She's always been open about that. But
Yeah.
this thing is just that past year. I have no idea what's caused this shift, but I'm telling her she has to lay the groundwork. But I don't know,
Mhm.
I don't know. You have to make your intentions known.
Yes, but it's so hard for people to do that. It's so hard for people to have those conversations. And it's your openness and what you've been through with your father together that has allowed her to be able to feel safe to say those things to you,
I
right?
guess so, right?
So now she needs to have the more uncomfortable versions of that conversation.
Right?
But yeah, trying to tell someone how to have those conversations is like
And
pretty
Claudia was just
impossible.
saying in the
Yeah.
chat that she's not Muslim herself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But she wants to be buried under Muslim rites, and then she wants to be
Yeah.
buried next to her grandmother
Yeah.
on her mom's side who was Muslim. And
Mm.
people have been telling her that she's crazy. So maybe there's a lot of judgment
Oh,
around what
yeah.
your wishes might be.
Yeah, and I mean, what a weird thing, isn't it? That anyone thinks they have any right to have any say in it other than the person
Right?
whose wishes they are. I think
Right?
that is such a strange aspect of human beings to think like that we have any right to judge anyone else in any decisions really, but
Mm-hmm.
like yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, it's such a weird thing that people are stuck in like such strong belief systems, right? And
Yeah.
can't stretch beyond them. They
No.
feel threatened by it, it seems. It's like,
Yeah.
well, there's often experiences that if we're that stuck that get us unstuck, aren't they? And they're not going to be super pleasant if we're so stuck. But yeah,
Hmm.
what a weird thing to judge. I was
Right? And then, like, Max is now bringing in a different aspect. So we talked about, like the emotional
oh,
aspect of, talking about our wishes, but the legal aspect, because Max is saying that they're experiencing a lot of conflict within the families at
hmm,
probate because of the total mess. Like this person wants to do one thing, that person wants to do the other because the wishes aren't known,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And I
It's very,
have I have two siblings I don't speak to after my dad died.
is
It
it?
got so ugly. And
Yes, I remember in the book. Tell us
yeah.
about it, Jody.
So, I won't go into too many details. Like
Yes,
the parts of my story that are mine to share, I feel like
yes,
are
yes.
I was the youngest. I was the one who was there. My dad was very difficult. And all of
Mm,
us had our own ways of trying to cope with being his children. But
right.
I had done a ton of healing work on that relationship and cutting cords in particular before
Right.
he got so sick. And so when he was dying, it was like, I can show up. No one else could. They had their
Hmm.
own stuff still. So,
Right.
and they did. I shouldn't say they didn't show up at all, but they weren't, they couldn't do the everyday
Right.
and the like day to day and the actual like here's how someone dies and here's how I like administer all the medications and increase doses, that stuff, that nitty gritty stuff. um yeah,
They
it
can
was
do it.
just me. And so in that last couple months I was just with dad all the time, and so he felt comfortable telling me what he wanted. And you guys, like, it was there, four of us, it was split evenly. It was split
Mhm.
evenly. I don't know how there could be conflict because but I think the conflict was I was the youngest, the only girl, and
Mhm.
they really resented me in a lot of ways, anyways. And we have different moms, different families. It was just we
Right.
grew up different, and
Yeah.
so they just were so angry at me, and they started like throwing all these accusations at me. I mean, I created a a package, and here's a good thing to like a good tip if you're going through this is like
Please.
keep everything, document everything, keep detailed notes, do all the things, even if you're not inclined for like paperwork and filing, do it because you might need it. And so I
Mm.
mean, like the last day I saw two of my brothers was, I presented them with their checks from closing everything out, and a
Okay.
whole entire, like, I think it was probably at least 40 pages of paper that showed every single thing I'd spent money on, every
Right.
cent he had, every detail of everything. And but it was stupid shit. Honestly, like my dad had said, like, "Oh, you don't have a TV? Have my TV, a $200 TV." And they were like, "You should pay us the $50 each."
What?
And so it was, I didn't, by the way. I was like,
Badass
but
Jody.
we got through it. We got through it. The TV is great, I like, still love it. Thank you, Dad. Well, like it's like, I mean, these are people who are in much better financial shape than me, also, by the way. It got so ugly, and they were accusing me of stealing things like the TV. It's just like, and it just, it's so hard, but sometimes you see people's true colors. And like, you know another thing that, so my German shepherd died 3 weeks after my dad, and she was all love. She was pure love. She was like the goofiest, gentlest, loveliest dog ever. She was just like the embodiment of love on this earth. And it was like the same day that she died that they started like pulling all this shit on me. And I had to deal with this nonsense while like experiencing my grief with my dog was more profound than my grief over my dad. She was like all love. He was
I can hear it in your voice as you speak, to be honest. Yeah.
like, she was, I mean, she was oh, it ripped my heart out to lose her, and like, so I am like swollen, grieving this like massive loss of love in my life. And these guys are coming at me with all this shit. And I'm like, you know what? This is not what love is. I don't
Yeah.
have to be present for and in these relationships that aren't actually loving. And then isn't that an interesting thing about unconditional love? Because I do love them. I do have love for them. That does not in any way, shape, or form require that I be in interactions with them in 3D
Correct.
at all. I
Absolutely.
saw I saw everything I needed to see. And so the other part of this is like, if you're going through that, first of all, I'm sorry, it is fucking terrible. It just is. It's just
Yes.
terrible to go through that with your family members, with people you think like, a lot of times our immediate family is like what we believe love is supposed to be, right? And then you get this
Yes.
whole show about like what it's not. And you go like, where is my center? Where do I come from? Where are my roots if they're not, if and then you get to like sort through what love is and what love isn't. And it was very, very healing for me, but totally heart-wrenching. But what I did, luckily my spiritual practice was at that point where I could just like fill myself with light and just be in light. And it's amazing when you can do that and you can hold that space for yourself when you're having these
Yes.
really terrible interactions, and go like, you can watch how the energy of the other people sort of spins around and spirals. If it can't find its way into you and it can't connect to like receptors within you that are
Yes.
still like ready for that trauma and ready for that abuse, it just spins around and comes back on them, and then they lose their minds. And it's really like a weird thing to watch. But I just filled myself with light, grounded myself, just stayed with the light. So as soon as any kind of negativity started coming up or any kind of attacks started coming at me, I just like was like, I'm filled with divine light. I'm filled with divine light, and just kept it as a mantra. So if you can find that space within, it sorts through some of the stuff for you. You can sit back and watch it all play out a little bit. It still hurts, but you can have a sort of cultivated detachment from it and recognize when those energies belong to those people, not to you. I found that I no longer needed to take on their feelings about me, their feelings about my dad, their feelings about themselves, their feelings about our family, about their families. It was like, I don't have to take that on. That's not mine to transmute. And it was like that our karmas were done. And that was it.
I love it when you answer questions that are posed in the chat without looking in the chat. Because before you started talking about that,
Yeah.
A. Williams, she asked the question, I've seen so much ugly conflict,
Yeah.
greed, and ego where it's ugly head at death.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
At the spiritual level, could it be an inability to process grief and transmute the energy of transition gracefully? And that's exactly what you're talking about. They're
Yeah.
unable to do that. So they have all this big explosion of the
Yeah.
grossness, the grittiness, right? But
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're able to transmute that energy and shift the energy of grief, then you might find that you're able to have an easier go at it and to kind of create your own little bubble where
Yeah.
they're not able to connect with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Mm,
think so. And, it's like we talked about that flood that comes up with grief. You know, if we are self aware enough to look at our own emotions, to watch
right.
them, to process them, to dig deep into where they come from and why, then when that comes up, we can do what needs to be done about it. We don't have
Yeah.
to inflict our emotions on other people. But for
Yes.
those who aren't as aware and can't, don't have like a cultivated sense of self awareness and don't have a practice of going deeper and examining their own feelings, then
Yes.
it's just so destructive. And I do also want to say, because he was just such a joy and a blessing. I have another brother who was, just by my side through all of that. And,
Oh,
they're all my half brothers from my dad's first marriage. So they have they're, I don't know, I never made a distinction between half and full siblings, but they grew
yeah.
up in the same household. And
Right.
he just was able to to see the whole thing happening and just hold space for me while that was all happening. And it was just such a blessing. And we're so much so death can also bring us together, because my brother
Yeah.
Eric and I have a relationship we would never have had. We were close, we loved each other. He's a joy. He's an absolute joy to be around and be with. But that deepened our connections on molecular levels. We then were just, yeah. It's so death can do the opposite too. It can just really fortify something that you knew was there,
Yeah.
but just get those flows really. I mean, there's so much light that flows through between us now that just it opened up the floodgates for that healing and that love to flow just totally unimpeded. So that was a neat part of it too.
I'm glad you mentioned that because we often see play out, just as A. Williams was saying,
Yeah.
like the nasty side of what death
Yeah.
can bring up.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of love that's shown in that moment between and among families.
Yeah.
And now I have two brothers and they've always had a little feud, right? Favoritism
Mm-hmm.
from my father, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in that moment, when our dad died, it's like we all closed ranks. Like we always
Yeah.
knew, like we loved each other, right? We always knew
Yeah.
that. That was always there. But
Mm-hmm.
we got that opportunity to show it and to
Yeah.
hold space for each other. So even we didn't even have a wake from our dad. We just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be with us, just
Yeah.
with us, and feel our energy flowing and just show each other so much love. So
Mm.
I didn't have any bad experiences where people were acting up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I didn't have that, but
Yeah.
I was able to see everybody like consolidate the love,
Yeah.
and I
That's so
think
beautiful.
we were able to do that because we're usually kind of stoic, but it
Mm.
really cracked us open, and we were able to just show exactly how we're feeling. Especially my little brother, who, as I told you,
Yeah.
he's like Scorpio. You're
Yeah.
not gonna get anything from him unless he wants you to get it, and we
Yeah.
were able to access him
Oh,
at
that's
that
so
time. So
beautiful.
it was lovely. I can tell
Yeah.
you that, and it continues to be
Yeah.
lovely because the conversations that can have with him now
Mm.
about emotions and about spirituality, because he went through an awakening from that, and about
Yeah.
spirituality, it's very,
Yeah.
very, very different and deep, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah. That's so nice. That's so beautiful, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's interesting too, isn't it, in families, when it is beautiful, it's so what you described as you were describing it, I saw the collective energy of your immediate family,
Yes.
we each go through a death with someone we love totally different, because we have different relationships. Like you said, your brothers
Yeah.
had totally different relationships with your
Yeah.
dad. You had a totally different relationship with him. But so you have to do the grieving on that individual basis.
Yes.
You have to transmute those connections because they're so specific and individual. But then there is that collective space holding of family
Yeah.
when it's when it's safe and when it's good. That is
Yeah.
like that grief moves the whole thing together when it's meant to.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah.
so neat. That's really, it is beautiful, isn't it? It's just so beautiful how these energies can move things that would otherwise be stuck forever. I mean, maybe not. Maybe there are other ways that that could move, but not in that way, not in that exact frequency range, not with that exact resonance of love. You know, it's
Yes.
different than anything else, I think.
Hmm. Jody, we have a question coming through from
Yeah.
George.
Yeah.
He said, just after death, we have a series of visions of key moments from
Mm.
our lifetime. Are these Akashic record images from the Akashic records, or do you have any info on what happens just after death?
I think this is individual too, and I can't
Right.
speak to it, but I think that it's interesting. A lot of like the people who have had near death experiences and some of
Yeah.
what they've, but that's all individual too, right? You listen to these
Right.
stories and they're just so totally different from one another. There are some common themes often,
Yes.
but I think it all depends on what a being has done in their lifetime in terms of
Mm-hmm.
what their soul hoped to achieve through the
Yes.
experience of this body, what they
Yes.
did achieve, and what they're moving into, what the purpose of what's next is for them. So I think that we do, and this is what I've been told about um what death is, I suppose, by the light, is
Mm-hmm.
that we are moving back into perfect, complete union with our souls, with all that is, with our whole
Mm-hmm.
entire essence and aspect. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what that is like, a processing of the data, like if it's, sort of like,
Yes.
and
Yes.
going as a being goes into that whole entire existence where time doesn't exist and lifetimes are not linear. So this
Right.
lifetime we've lived is linear and we experience it linearly because we're still like, having a human experience and our brains have to
Experience. Yeah.
understand it. But yeah, that's what I'm getting is it's a processing of the data of what data has been accumulated. And I think that is what the Akashic records are, is like a whole huge accumulation of the data that, um a being collects over lifetimes and
Yes.
lifetimes and different aspects and different multidimensional aspects. And just like, I mean, the whole entirety of a being, of an essence, of a soul is so much bigger than we can comprehend. So, you
Mhm.
know, I think that's what I get from that. Did that answer that to me?
Yeah. And I get that too. I get
Yeah.
that too. And yeah, that's just what it is. It is the processing and analyzing of data.
Mm.
When we're
Yeah.
here, we're a researcher, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we're right, and we're
Hmm.
always looking for the patterns and trying to make meaning. And I
Yeah.
feel like this all like our last attempt to like write the conclusion to our study before we
Yeah.
go on to what the next study is. You
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yep. Yep. Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think that it's so interesting how, when I get the energy of what a soul is doing by experiencing life and what, like, these soul contracts that we sign up for and these ways that we choose to experience. I mean, we never would humanly pick some of the circumstances we experience in life, right? It just would be, unless you're masochistic,
Just thank you. Thank you, right?
but like, yeah, a soul can sit back and go like, yes, good work, just like
Yeah.
one experience after another, joy, sorrow, all of it. There's no sense on a soul level of good or bad experience. And
Hmm.
that, I think, is part of that processing, is like casting off our human perceptions of what is like hierarchically a good thing and a bad thing, and like
Hmm.
what was a good experience. I don't feel like our soul is judging how we learn or whether we learn. If we
Hmm.
don't, then we'll just have another opportunity, and I don't get that being
Yes.
a judgmental thing on a soul
I don't
level.
get that either.
I think
No.
there are a lot of reasons why we can't learn the lessons that we are supposed to be learning on a soul level, you know?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's a really neat thing when you start to get into that aspect of it, isn't it? Where you start to understand more of who you really are, like the big
Yes.
S self.
Yes.
And that just frees up a lot of space for more awareness, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes. Expansion.
Yeah. Yeah. Not
And
that we're
like
not
you
all getting hit humanly all the time anyway.
I don't know. As you were saying, like processing the data and all that, like,
Yeah.
is that what your book is about? Like processing your data?
I think so. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. I think it's really interesting. And I talk in the beginning about how Little made me do it. Little made me sit down and write this book while she was
Right.
alive. I knew she was dying. I mean, I kind of hoped at the beginning, and I look at the dates, there was still like hope that, she was still eating. She was still, but she was my space holder through all
Yeah.
those other six deaths. So she wanted like this book to be like a place where we held space together. And she wanted me to tell everyone what we had been through. And she wanted me to do it in real time. And it was like, really? Like, I just want to sit here and like hold you and cry. And she's like, get to work.
Did
She
she
was
ever
so
tell
bossy.
you? Did she ever tell you why this book needed to be?
Because people need to understand that death is not just horrible and not
Right.
just sad and not just, that those parts exist. And she was a big part of including the grittiness of it, because her death in some ways was it's like so hard for me. I had done so much to keep her alive up
Yeah.
till 18 and a half. And so like to let go of some of the things like her taking her medications and stuff, it was hard for me. She didn't seem to be in any pain or suffering until like the last day. It was like, oh, she's really dying now, so that looks
Mhm.
different then. um but and if she hadn't been able to go, there's a point always with the animals where you go like, oh, is this a point where I have to help, where we need to
Yes.
call in help, and so we were
Yes.
we were really close if she hadn't gone that day. But she that was her plan. She was going to go that day, like, you know but yeah, she was so clear that like we needed to document what we had experienced together, what we were experiencing together while she was passing, and that it would open up a space in people's hearts to be able to do this work themselves if they're called to it. And if they find themselves in the position we found ourselves in, we're just like one after the next, we're dying in front of us, like,
Mhm.
because because of what we said, like this misunderstanding didn't always exist. I
No.
think it probably was always hard for people to grieve the people and animals they love. But was it always like blinders on, I'm not going to acknowledge it, I'm not going to
I
deal with
don't
it, I'm
think
not
so.
I don't think so either. I think
I
that it
don't
was
think so.
so much more common. Maybe it's part of like, lifespans getting longer, and us having treatments for things that people didn't
Yeah.
have before. It's like we can sort of like pretend that we can extend life
Yes.
forever, and you can't. I don't think we want to. I don't
I
want to.
wouldn't. I wouldn't.
No.
Jody, as you talk about like extending lifespans, what do you
Yeah.
think about shortening lifespans? Like persons who would want like um euthanasia for
You know,
themselves. Because you talk about it with animals and you talk about it
yeah.
very easily. But what about persons?
I think that's a really important thing that each individual has to go through.
Yeah.
I mean, because, I've talked in this space before about my like super crazy Christian days growing up. And I say
Yes.
that like as a thing about my experience of Christianity getting a little crazy, right? Like not however anyone needs to experience their own
Understand.
spirituality. So at the time, um, Dr. Jack Kevorkian was here in the state of Michigan
Oh,
where I
ooh,
live,
ooh,
and
ooh, ooh.
he was in prison doing his like hunger strike.
Right.
And I like thought, oh my God, what an audacity of this person to think that he can play God, right?
Right.
And then as I've gotten older, it's like, and sort of looked at things from a different perspective, it's like, who am I? What audacity I have to think that I should be able to say like how a person wants to leave this
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
when they are suffering so intensely. And then, you know, I mean, I think that people should have whatever choices they need. And
Agreed
I
with
think
you.
there's a really beautiful conversation happening around that. I do think that there are a lot of beings who, like my Aunt Ro was, I mean, it was brutal humanly to watch. And if I didn't have
Mm.
the higher perspective and couldn't tune into her energy, I
Mm-hmm.
would just have looked at it as like just massive suffering and nothing else.
Mm.
By going through all that she went through to get to the end of her life, and the suffering that her physical body went through, and then she had dementia also, so the suffering that she went through emotionally as she traversed timelines and didn't know what was happening and what was real and what wasn't. um, that was so, she did so much amazing good work on a soul level during that
Right.
period of time. So I could look at
Right.
it and go like, wow, this is like something that a soul can do. So I can see where, like a being would want to get all their work done in
Yeah.
whatever ways that, like, they're supposed to. I can see where a being would not choose to end their life,
Yeah. Yeah.
in a way, other than the way that you go. Like, but
Yeah.
I just think that's such a personal
It's a
choice.
personal thing. I believe so too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe so too. Like,
And
if it's
especially,
one, Mhm.
yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was just going to say, especially if you get to a point where like, this is it. And
Yeah.
yeah, ha-
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I think so too. And to me, I think once like the proper like process and safeguards are in place in terms of, really talking it over with a professional
yeah,
so that they can really assess, that this is what you want to do and not just because you're feeling no at
yeah,
any given point in time.
yeah.
And you really are fully aware of your circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a problem with it at all. I mean, I
Me
believe in
neither.
free will. I believe in free will.
Yeah.
Once you're not hurting somebody else, like,
Mm-hmm.
well, you're gonna hurt somebody else. Well, they're going to be hurt. You're not gonna hurt them.
Yeah.
They're going to be hurt, right? Because they're
Yeah.
people that are going to be affected by your death.
Yeah.
You are not going to hurt them, but they're going to be hurt, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
once you are not hurting them, then I say it's up to the individual.
I think so too. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the thing about death, that in my experience is that each one is so incredibly individual.
yeah,
So of course it is. It's like, of course
yeah.
it's like the most monumental experience, maybe other than birth, that a being goes
Mm-hmm,
through. It's
hmm
the most massive transmutation of energy I think that exists on this planet,
I
and
think
in
so
this
too.
realm. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty individual experience. We
Mm,
can do a lot to help. We can do a lot to hold space, but gosh, in the end it's really up to them.
it's really
Each
up to
each
them.
one, it's like I can help build a bridge. I can help ease suffering. I can help do a
Yes,
lot of things energetically, but at a certain point each one of them left my field and went
yes,
into what's next. And that
yeah.
was their own space, their own essence, their own soul, their own like gateway into
Yeah,
everything.
they did that. We
They
didn't
did
do
that.
that. They
No.
did that. Yeah,
Yep.
they did that.
Yep.
Mm, they
What a
did that.
beautiful thing they did.
And I know, right?
Yeah.
Jody, we've already gone over our time, but I just want to ask if anybody has any other questions, and then I'd like you to tell us how people can purchase your book because I'm reading the online copy, but I want my own
Okay.
hard copy, and I want it
Yeah.
autographed. Thank you very much.
Okay. All
Right,
right. Yeah.
but I'm just gonna check and see if anybody has any other questions that they
Yeah.
would like to ask around this topic.
Yeah.
And then we'll close off. Let's give a few minutes
Oh
there.
yeah, I see what Claudia said about reincarnation too, and being
Hmm.
like so locked into the belief systems of Christianity. I did not,
Same,
and
same,
then
same.
I had a friend in late teens when I was like leaving the church and trying to like go off on a quest to figure out what I actually believed. And she started talking about past lives in a way that was so like, obviously this is the way that it is. And it was
Mhm.
such a truth inside of like, first that I had known her before, and then like I started looking around at all these other people I had known before, and it just was so like, it just hit as such a bottom line truth inside me. I know not everyone believes it, but like, yeah, that I can't explain it either. It just was there as soon as like that awareness flipped on, and it was like, oh, now I can see these connections everywhere I look, you know?
Well, I grew up fundamental Catholic,
Yeah.
so we didn't have that.
No.
So that definitely wasn't in my belief system at all.
Yeah.
But what was in my belief system that was that this earth was a school. I knew it. We were in school
Yeah.
and we were
Yeah.
learning lessons and we would graduate to different levels. I felt like that in my soul.
Yep.
And then when I started thinking about past lives, like like the babies started being born in my family. So we're talking my early 20s, right?
Yeah.
Babies started being born. And when you looked at these children, you swear it's all men and women coming back. I mean, you look at their face
Yeah.
and there's so much wisdom, and you can see like this, you can see like an old man or old woman that
Yeah.
was there before. And
Yes.
I'm like, these people were here before. And
Yes.
that became kind of cemented in my psyche
Mhm. Yeah.
until like different things started happening to me, and I realized these aren't just memories of these aren't memories from this life. This is something else.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Mhm.
I wonder too, like you said that about this being school. I wonder how many of us who are meant to be on a spiritual journey in this lifetime came in like with that deep understanding already. Because I had the same thing. It was like, this
Yes.
is just everything was like, what do I learn from this? What do I take from
Yes.
this? And yeah, I bet that's a pretty common thread for light workers, spiritual people on a spiritual path. I
I
think
think
so.
they recognize. And there's some people that they're just floating through life, Jody. There's
Yeah.
some people that are just floating through life. They're not questioning anything,
Yeah.
or patterns or or anything like that. Like nothing is consolidated. They're not doing research.
Yeah.
Things are
Isn't
just happening, and I don't know.
it's an interesting like path a soul chooses, I suppose. And I always
Yes.
wonder with people like that, like what are they learning? What are they processing and transmuting by being here? It's just a totally different frequency range than what
Yeah.
I am doing. And it's interesting. It's so many of those people are like,
I think they're still in the data collection phase.
yeah,
So
I think so too.
they're having
Yeah.
they're having experiences,
Yeah.
but they haven't reached the data analysis. The data
Yeah.
analysis might come through a next life where they pick up more patterns and then they start collating.
Yeah, and like the thing that once we get out of like linear time, right? And this
Yes.
is something that I just kept like trying to push the light and my guides into like telling me, okay, how did these lives like stack up? This one and then this one and then this one and then this one.
Yes.
And it's like they kept telling me like it doesn't work that
It's
way.
not like that.
No. And so if you think about it like, more like the spirograph, like all sort of
Right.
happening all at the same time, maybe a different life, like a past life, what we consider a past life, was one that they did like have a massive amount of
Right.
spiritual work. And this one is just like a data collector. And
Yeah.
so when we can let go of like it's just when we can let go of the linear, there's so
Yeah.
much more opportunity to see um, people's experiences. I don't know, like for what they are, right?
Yeah.
For like their own unique way of going through things.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I like that because like sometimes when we believe that we've done a lot of spiritual work, like we look at others who we deem as not doing spiritual work, and we
Yeah.
can be a little judgy sometimes. Like, and
Yeah.
we may even try to like convert, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Even though their journey is tailor made for them, we want to
Yeah.
interfere and we
Yeah.
want to intervene, right? And we want to
Yes.
fix, but they are
Yes.
literally on a journey that their soul has created
Yeah.
for them. So like where does their like autonomy?
Mm.
Um, where's that boundary? Us wanting to help
Yeah. Yeah.
and their soul journey. Like, I don't know. So
I know, and isn't that the thing about learning to hold space? It's like,
right.
the more that we cultivate our capacity for holding space and not, it was early on when I started tuning in and writing, the light had told me, like, you need to cultivate a sense of detachment. And like,
Yeah.
love does not require that you save people, but there was
No.
that old
No.
Christian mentality that I should be saving
Yes.
people in Jesus's name, like you do.
Yes.
But it never worked, first of all. And second of all, like, it was, yeah, like inflicting something on someone else with a value judgment, as opposed to
Yes.
just like holding space for whatever they're experiencing. And that's
Yes.
like a way that you can get to some pretty profound healing. And then it like
Mhm.
happens both ways, right? When you're really holding
Yeah.
space for someone, especially like if we're doing a reading, right? Or like even in a group like this, we're all collectively holding space, and all sorts of things start moving. And like, yeah, we're the ones kind of like facilitating and doing the talk, but like,
Yes.
we're being moved as well, because
Yeah.
that's the way energy works. So if we were in a rigid sort of belief system mindset that we were the ones doing the talk, and we were the ones like who
Mhm.
have the expertise, and we're the ones who like are standing up here like telling you, what to think, let's say,
Yes.
as opposed to just saying, here's our experiences, and kind of like allowing it to move into the space we're holding, that
Yes.
would be a totally different experience. It would be
Agreed.
something rigid, as opposed to something that's living, breathing, and full of like movement and transmutation. But
Yeah.
that's so hard to get to, that like that space of detaching from our value judgments,
Mhm.
what we want to see, especially for the people we love, right? Like, I
Mhm.
want to see,
Mhm.
like, good things happen, and I have a very set idea of what that
Good
means.
for us, right? Yes. Yeah.
Weird. Weird that they don't all just fall in line, like,
That's what I say.
uh,
You just have to leave people alone. That this whatever experience they're having is tailor made
yeah, and it's
for them.
beautiful too,
Yeah. And it's
even if it
beautiful too.
humanly doesn't look like it, even if humanly
Yeah.
it looks really messy, and you think,
Very messy. Some people, they have to go through that mess, and
yeah,
do their little cleanup. Do a
yeah,
little
yeah,
cleanup. Yeah.
yeah.
So listen, Jody, what's this? Um, how can we get your book? How
Oh
can we
yeah.
get your book?
So it's available on my website, and
Okay.
my website is the
Can you?
David. Yep,
Oh, is www David Connection?
yep.com. And then, I should have like uh looked at that before. I think it's there's a shop link. Um but I do
All right.
have,
Let me see if I can find it whilst you're
yeah,
talking.
cuz I do have
Okay.
it. What's the
Okay.
backslash part though? I think it's hmm I put it in something recently.
And then it's telling me now they're having trouble connecting to that website. Why? Jody, I can put it in a community post.
Okay. Can I
Yeah.
can I put it in the chat?
Yeah, please, please.
I don't know. I mean, I'm very like
Yeah,
not good at this kind of thing. So let's see if
yeah,
it
definitely. If you can get it.
um I can. Okay, bear with me one moment, everyone. Let's see. I think I did it. I was like, I sent like a PayPal invoice the other day, and I was like, "Oh my god, look at what I just did." I was joking that I quit learning new things like right around the time Snapchat happened. I was like, no, I'm
I'm gonna stay with this.
I got it. I know enough things. This comment failed to post. Son of a gun.
Why?
I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
Like, I
Can
really
you try
want you
one more
guys to,
time?
yeah, let me see if I can also, maybe if I pull up on YouTube instead of in the thing that we're on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Pull it up on YouTube.
How do I mute myself? Because now it's like a,
You're getting the feedback. Okay. Oh, okay. Not seen it yet.
did it happen?
No, I'm not seeing the link, Jody.
Hmm.
Hmm. Maybe there's a little delay and might come up in a bit. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah. I think there might have been because I was hearing what I said after I had already said it. So
Okay. So it should come up on the chat then. Mex was just saying that she thinks that Christian religions are presented as a kind of intro, and then it's for
mm,
us to go deeper and find out more. What you think about that?
I think maybe that's all religion, isn't it? Because like I
Right,
think
right.
that
I
they're
got you.
all, yeah, they're all sort of like belief systems that can be gateways to greater and deeper spiritual understanding. But like really, I always think the difference between a religion, generally speaking, and a, you know, a spiritual path is all about like, is this structure telling me what to believe, or is it encouraging me to find what I believe?
Got it.
And so yeah, I think that's a big, and isn't the Christian religion interesting? Because if you look at like the energy of Jesus and what he was teaching, it was like find it within yourself. But then
Yes.
there's like all these different forms of a religion based around this being who told us to look within and find God within, that are saying like, no, don't do that, listen to us instead. And I just think that's kind of bonkers, but that's what people do to religion, and like that's what we're, yeah, that's, I don't know, does that make sense?
Mm, definitely makes sense to me. Yeah. Definitely makes sense to me. And it's so interesting that, all the religions that we have now evolved out of a spiritual framework, whether that
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
spiritual framework was some sort of indigenous religion or something
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
And then they're now trying to tell the originators that what they're doing is wrong, even though they evolved out of it. And most of the beliefs that we see in Abrahamic religions and other religions are
Mm-hmm.
kind of bastardized versions of spiritual systems from way back when.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's so strange, isn't it?
Very strange.
But I think it's like comes out of like a need for people, human beings, to like control each other, to control our
Yeah,
experiences, to control what we think and feel. And,
yeah.
you know, I think for a lot of people who are finding their comfort and solace, community, their expression of God in a religion, it, I mean, there are so many, there's just millions of reasons why that happens. But,
Hmm.
and, but yeah, it's choosing to exist within a structure, right?
Well, there's some people that may need structure. Mm,
Definitely. I
mm,
definitely needed a gateway to
mm-hmm,
understanding and
mm-hmm,
questioning God, right?
mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
yeah.
Somebody asked an interesting question that may or may not be related. They were asking that they wanted to know if baptism blocks the third eye, and
Oh,
they were saying that from what they observed in Italy, it does. It's not something that I've ever explored.
me neither. Hmm.
Mm. Is it the baptism or is it like the energy of doctrine
I feel like
and
that's it,
dogma?
right? The energy of the
The-
doctrine and the dogma, and then the like
yeah, right?
the structure, the rigid structure of the
Sure.
belief system, and trying to fit within the belief system. Um,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but I think that there are a lot of people who have been baptized who still have that access and capacity.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I think that would
Right.
maybe be a soul by soul kind of thing too.
Right.
If a
Mm-hmm.
soul chooses to go through life without access to that, um,
Right.
then yeah,
Mm.
I I would imagine too. It depends on the the church, the priest or minister or whoever is performing the ritual.
Because it is
Um,
a ritual,
yeah, yeah,
right?
and the intentions of the people around the
Or
being.
around. I'm agreeing. Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
this is an interesting
Hmm.
question. Thank you for asking it.
That's
I'm so
something that we
curious
should
about
like
it now.
come together and really get messages on. But I
Yeah,
could see where that can happen if we
yeah,
take
I can
into account,
too.
as you said, the whole ritualistic, the ritual of it, the
Hmm.
intentions of the people around us, and especially
Yeah,
the vows that I said
yeah.
during the ritual to believe
Hmm.
in, well, let's say the baptism of the Catholic one, to believe in the Holy Catholic Church, teachings of the
Yeah,
church, that can block out a lot of things,
yeah, yeah.
right?
And
So it could definitely happen. It
yeah,
could,
and for me, I chose to be baptized when I was 11. And so it was like this
right?
beautiful experience for me because I was choosing, like, I thought I was choosing the path that God had put me on. And
Yes,
I had
yes,
like a very firm idea of what I believed already. So
yes,
I was picking it. And the same thing with communion, which is also a ritual. I
right.
believed so strongly in like the ritual of it, of the connection to
Yes,
God through
yes,
this ritual. Um,
yes,
but I was choosing to exist in that structure. So, I think that
yes.
there are beings who are, practitioners of certain faiths that are interested in opening beings up to their own connection to God. And that
Hmm.
those beings, if they perform a baptism, would be connecting someone more deeply with the flow of
Yes,
light as opposed to
yes,
closing it off. Like you said, it's the intentions of the people in the circumstance of the ritual. I suppose
yeah.
that's true of any ritual, isn't it? Is like, what
And
are your
ritual.
intentions? Are they
Yeah,
pure? Because
yeah.
a
You're making
pure ritual is,
connects and chords. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm. I could see that. I could
interesting.
see that. But that's an interesting observation, and it comes from Song. Oh, Song is one of my students. That's an interesting question. I've
Yeah,
never thought about that, but I could definitely see how that can happen.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I was interested too because like I had not been around last rites, and
Hmm.
my uncle Dan and Aunt Ro were Catholic, and so and her brother is a priest. So
Yes. Oh.
I got to know this priest, not super, closely, but I got to have a lot of conversations with him, and he was such a
Mhm.
person of God. I mean, like really
Yes.
pure of faith. And my Aunt Ro was like, a woman of faith. I put such like a strong like emphasis on like what that can truly mean for a soul to
Yeah.
like choose a path and experience God through a path. And it was so
Yes.
authentic in her, and it was never oppressive. It never closed down anything for anyone. She was so open and so generous and so kind and so like aware of like the world around her being not just what the Catholic Church told her. She was so not judgmental. Or, I mean, like, we have a lot of gay people in our family. She was
Yeah.
like, yes, gay people, yes, all of you, like, it's just
Yeah.
so.
My grandmother
Yeah,
was the same, very open. And
yeah,
like, listen, she was big in the Catholic Church, okay?
yeah,
Started the first like charismatic mission in all Ireland, that kind
yeah,
of thing. So she
yeah,
was big, this is big thing. But she always believed that whatever you believed in, try to be the best and try to evolve to the highest pinnacle of that.
yes,
Whatever it was.
yeah, right.
Whatever it was. Yeah.
And that's pure spirituality, through whatever expression we find it, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, the last rites ritual I found so interesting to participate in with Uncle Dan um, because it was like seeing it energetically. And I did this after the fact. We were pretty deep in like the moment, while he was actually dying. But in looking at it afterwards, it's like, wow, a person with like with a ritual that they have done
Yes.
over and over again, and with a
Yes.
capacity for death work, can help a being release and transmute those connections to the physical in a way that is so beautiful. And I wonder we don't have like some version of last rites for everyone, even,
For
outside of
everyone.
religion.
I,
It was
I never thought
beautiful.
about that, Jen. I
Yeah.
never thought about that. A universal last rites.
And I tell this in the book, but like it was so cute because as my first kitty was dying, and his name was Beast, and he was
Hmm.
laying on my chest, and he was going, and his breath was changing, and I was holding him in a way where I could feel his heartbeat, as he was going. And he quit breathing, but his heart, well, he's just slowing down. And at a certain point, I think he just quit breathing, and on his last breath, my other cat, Mouse, got up from the end of the bed, crossed over me, came around, and licked Beast's paw, and his heart fluttered and stopped. And I was like, it took
Oh,
me a while to realize Mouse did last rites for Beast. That was his way
right, right, right.
of releasing the connections for his best friend, who he'd been through his whole life with, because Beast was older. It's like it was so beautiful. And then when Mouse passed, I was guided to just keep petting him after he had passed, for about a half an hour, just stroking his body and letting him go, just helping him transmute those connections. And that's when I
Right.
got that he had done that for Beast in that moment. And it was so neat. So even the animals, I think, have
Have
last
their
rites.
own system.
Yeah,
Right, right.
it's
And
so
then,
neat.
Mex is reminding us that many indigenous practices have their rituals and their systems for, the
Yeah,
release of the soul and that easy transition,
yeah.
you
Because
know?
I think that when we're truly connected to all that is, right? Or as much as we can be in human bodies,
Mhm.
you get the energy. Even if you can't
Yeah,
see it, you get it. It
yeah,
feels profound. So, yeah, I think it makes sense that human beings have found all sorts of ways to help each other transmute those physical things. Yeah,
right.
that's neat. I feel like a lot of the indigenous practices and beliefs were closer to all that is than like,
What we have. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
I'm agreeing with you.
yeah.
Yeah,
Where a lot of this other, a lot of other practices and religions and everything like that are more about like disconnecting you from all that is and telling you like you're in this like box of,
mm,
and that the only gateway to all that is like this person, often a man, standing up in front of you and telling you what to
right.
believe, right? But like, yeah, I feel like a lot of what I've read about the indigenous beliefs and practices and kind of gotten from the energy of reading about them is so much more about the oneness, about the connection,
Yes.
and the connection to all that is, right? The respect for all that is, the acknowledgement of the essence and the existence of all that is, and
Mm.
the manifestation of a soul through like this tree out here, as opposed to just like through a body and having like a hierarchical understanding. Yeah.
I think the only religion that I have felt that at the funeral service was, it was, they were doing, well, a cremation according to Hindu rites.
Oh
And
yeah.
then they were talking about, releasing the essence of who this person was in this lifetime
Mm-hmm.
to all that is through fire, having
Yeah.
all the elements present
Mm. Yeah.
to help the soul return. And I felt that very powerfully in that moment. I felt it
Yeah.
very powerfully.
I know. Doesn't that make you feel like alchemy? That's like an alchemical transmutation.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Hmm. Jones, let me put the link back again.
Okay.
I know
Thanks.
I said you'd only be on for an hour, but it's just so beautiful talking about this. And
Yes. And I thought, yeah, we'll do an hour. Like I believed us. I believed us completely. And then I'm not at all surprised.
oh my goodness. And when I just posted a link there again, it was 11:44. And
Ah,
that is such a beautiful number. It's like a magic
yeah.
number for me. So,
Yeah.
it was meant to be this way.
Yeah. Oh, thank
Yeah.
you guys all so much. And yeah, I'm excited about the book. And if any of you
Yeah.
guys feel called to read it, I would so appreciate it. It just I'm I was telling you just the other day, right? Like
Yeah.
I've done the final read through and I finally have this sense of detachment around it. Like
Right.
it's ready to belong to whoever needs it. And that is such a freeing thing because this
Yes.
thing has been in the works for almost 4 years. And it's
Yes,
like
I remember.
I I know you've been so encouraging to me this whole time. Like, how's that book going? Like, and but it feels like it's the right time and place for people to
Yes.
to be able to have it. So thanks to anyone who's interested. And I just so appreciate you guys holding space for this too. Like, I just feel so great about this conversation and what we've been able to share and the energy we've been able to move today. It's just been lovely.
It has been lovely.
Yeah.
It's been emotional and it has been lovely.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Okay, guys, thank you so much for being here with us. It was lovely. It was absolutely lovely. I
So
feel
lovely.
like we didn't just release information, but like there's something that we both needed to release too,
I think
like
so.
grief. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
And
get
that's
that.
the thing about grief, isn't it? Like we're
Yeah,
unpacking it in layers all the time.
all the
And
time.
oh, it is beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, guys, take care. Thank you guys so much. Lovely as usual. Okay, bye.
Bye everyone.